Since the first moment humanity looked up at the night sky, one question refused to fade. Are we alone in the universe? For centuries, Earth's telescopes scanned distant stars, exoplanets, and galaxies, finding nothing but silence. That silence was comforting at first, almost peaceful. But over time, it became unsettling, like staring into an ocean that might be staring back. By the year 2847, human civilization had reached a level of technological advancement that would have been considered godlike in earlier eras. The Helios Array, a massive deep space observatory system placed beyond Earth's orbit, was humanity's most sensitive eye into the cosmos. It could detect gravitational distortions, quantum fluctuations, and artificial electromagnetic patterns across light-years of space. On an otherwise routine cycle of observation, the Helios Array registered something unusual coming from the outer regions of the Orion Nebula. At first, it was dismissed as background interference, perhaps remnants of a dying star or natural cosmic radiation. But as the data continued to stream in, analysts began to realize something disturbing. The signal was not random. It was structured. Mathematical sequences repeated in precise cycles. Fractal-like patterns unfolded within the data stream. Even more unsettling, the signal appeared to be evolving in real time, as if it was responding to something. As if it was part of a conversation humanity had never known it was engaged in. The Global Space Council immediately classified the phenomenon as the Orion Response Signal. For the first time in recorded history, humanity believed it had received an intentional message from an extraterrestrial intelligence. Excitement spread quickly across scientific communities. Some believed it was the greatest discovery in human history. Others were more cautious, warning that communication from an unknown civilization could be dangerous. Still, curiosity outweighed fear. But beneath the excitement, something deeper and more unsettling was happening. The signal's origin point was shifting. Slowly at first, then with increasing precision, its directional alignment began to focus toward the solar system. It was no longer just a distant message. It was tracking something. Or someone. 72 hours after the initial detection, the Helios Array recorded a second anomaly. Near the Orion Nebula, a region of spacetime began to distort unnaturally. At first it looked like a minor gravitational ripple, but within hours it expanded into a structured movement pattern. Something enormous had begun accelerating through space. Whatever it was not natural. It was engineered. Initial calculations suggested a mass so large it defied conventional classification, far beyond any known asteroid or comet. Yet it moved with perfect control, following a calculated trajectory through interstellar space. Then the high-resolution imaging systems finally locked onto it. The data revealed a colossal structure, dark, metallic, and impossibly complex in design. It was not shaped by natural forces. Every surface, every angle, every rotating segment suggested deliberate construction on a scale beyond human comprehension. It was a ship, but not a ship like anything humanity had ever imagined. It was the size of a small planet. The analysts named it the Black Ark. At that moment, no one realized the truth. This was not a first contact. It was not a discovery. It was an approach. And the Black Ark was heading directly toward Earth, with absolute certainty and without deviation. As it crossed the void between stars, one fact became undeniable. The universe had not been silent. It had been waiting. The first confirmed visual of the Black Ark shattered every remaining illusion humanity had about being prepared for the unknown. As it entered the outer boundaries of the solar system, space itself seemed to react to its presence. Subtle gravitational distortions rippled through the Kuiper belt. Saturn's ring structure developed minor irregularities that could not be explained by natural physics alone. Even Neptune's orbital path showed a measurable deviation, as if the fabric of space was bending slightly around the approaching mass. Earth-based observatories and orbital platforms went into full tracking mode. Every available sensor, telescope, and quantum array was directed toward the incoming object. What they recorded was beyond anything in human engineering history. The Black Ark was not simply moving through space. It was reshaping it. Then came the moment that changed everything. Without warning, The ark initiated communication. But not in any known language. No radio transmission. No electromagnetic signal in human-readable format. Instead, every major communication system on Earth, military, civilian, scientific, simultaneously displayed a series of visual fragments. At first, they appeared meaningless. Shattered cities floating in space, stars collapsing into darkness, oceans boiling away from planets. Civilizations rising and falling like brief sparks in an endless void. Then the images repeated. Again and again. Each cycle ended with a single symbol burned into every screen across the world. Omega. Omega. The end. Global interpretation teams worked instantly, feeding the data into quantum AI translation systems. Within minutes, a consensus began to form. This was not greeting protocol. It was not curiosity. It was classification. Humanity was being catalogued and categorized as something that would eventually be removed. Panic spread through international governments as the United Earth Defense Initiative, UEDI, was activated. For the first time in history, national boundaries dissolved in real-time military coordination. Satellite weapons systems were armed. Orbital defense grids were activated. Deep space interceptor fleets were launched from hidden lunar bases. But even as humanity prepared, the Black Ark continued its approach without hesitation. Then came the deployment. From the Ark's lower hemisphere, thousands of smaller vessels detached simultaneously. They were not traditional spacecraft. Their structures appeared partially mechanical, partially biological, like something grown rather than built. Their surfaces shifted subtly, as though adapting to the environment around them. Human analysts gave them a name almost instinctively: the Serens. At first, the Seren fleet did not attack. Instead, they scanned. They moved across Earth's orbital perimeter with surgical precision, mapping every satellite, every defense grid, every communication relay. They observed Earth's entire technological network in minutes, compressing decades of global intelligence into real-time analysis. It was not exploration. It was evaluation. And when the scanning phase ended, Earth finally understood the purpose of the delay. The first strike came without warning. A single energy pulse emitted from one of the Seren units expanded across near-Earth orbit like an invisible wave. Within seconds, over 40% of all orbital satellites ceased functioning. Communication networks collapsed. Navigation systems failed. Military coordination channels went dark across continents. Earth had been partially blinded. Panic turned into chaos. And in that silence between failing systems, one truth became painfully clear to every surviving command center on the planet. This was not an invasion driven by conquest. It was something far more precise. A controlled removal of humanity's ability to respond. And the Black Ark had not even reached the inner solar system yet. The blackout of orbital systems lasted only minutes, but for humanity it felt like the sky itself had been cut open. Command centers across Earth struggled to reconnect fractured communication lines as military networks rerouted through emergency ground-based systems. The United Earth Defense Initiative, UEDI, had been built for asteroid impacts, solar storms, even rogue state warfare, but nothing in its doctrine accounted for an intelligent force disabling space infrastructure in a single coordinated pulse. Yet within that confusion, something remarkable happened. Humanity adapted. Deep beneath the Himalayas, the Atlantic Rift Command Station initiated Protocol Hades, a classified emergency response system designed decades earlier but never activated. Across continents, dormant defense arrays awakened. Railgun platforms hidden in deserts powered up. Submarine-launched orbital missiles were prepared. Lunar-based defense cannons locked onto incoming trajectories. For the first time since its creation, Earth was preparing to strike back at something not from Earth. But there was a problem no one wanted to admit. They were reacting to something they did not understand. Still, the order came. Engage target formations. Fire on Seren units. The first counterattack began with the launch of Project Ars, orbital kinetic strike missiles designed to intercept objects in near-Earth space at hypersonic speeds. Dozens of missiles ascended through the atmosphere in coordinated arcs, their trajectories calculated to intersect with the outer Seren fleet. For a brief moment, hope returned. Then the Serens responded. They did not evade. They did not counter with visible weapons. Instead, space itself seemed to refuse the missiles. As the first wave of human projectiles entered low Earth orbit, their guidance systems began to fail. Trajectories warped. Propulsion systems misfired. Some missiles simply stopped accelerating, suspended in space as if an invisible force had grabbed them mid-flight. And then they vanished. Not exploded. Not destroyed. Just erased from sensors. Across control rooms, engineers watched in disbelief as entire strike formations disappeared from every tracking system simultaneously. The data didn't show impact. It didn't show interception. It showed removal from physical detectability. Panic escalated into chaos. Meanwhile, the Seren fleet shifted position for the first time. They were no longer just surrounding Earth. They were organizing, forming a geometric structure in orbit that resembled a vast, rotating lattice around the planet. The pattern was not defensive. It was not random. It was symmetrical, intentional. As analysts scrambled to decode the formation, a second wave of activity emerged from the black arc itself. For the first time since its arrival, the arc emitted a visible energy discharge. A dark pulse expanded outward, not as light, but as distortion, like reality bending under pressure. Space around the inner solar system shimmered as if the laws of physics were temporarily unstable. Saturn's magnetic field fluctuated violently. Mars lost signal contact with Earth for 17 seconds. And then the Serens executed their next action. Every remaining active satellite in Earth's orbit received a simultaneous transmission. Not a message in words, but a reconstruction of Earth's own planetary defense map. Every weapon system, every command center, every hidden facility was displayed in perfect detail. They already knew everything. They had known before the first shot was fired. That was when UEDI Command realized the terrifying truth. The counterattack had not been a battle. It had been an evaluation of resistance. And humanity had just failed its first test. Far beyond Earth's orbit, the Black Arc continued its silent advance toward the inner solar system, while the Serens tightened their orbital formation like a closing net. The war had not truly begun yet. But Earth was already losing ground it did not know it had. For the first time since the arrival of the Black Arc, Earth's scientists noticed something that made the situation even more disturbing than outright destruction: inconsistency. The Seren units were not behaving like a single unified species. Their movements, although coordinated, showed subtle variations in structure and energy signatures. Some operated with extreme precision, almost mechanical in nature. Others showed unpredictable fluctuations, as if responding to internal commands rather than a central system. This contradiction forced UEDI analysts to reconsider everything they thought they knew. And then it happened. A second signal emerged from deep space. Not from the Black Arc. From behind it. At first, it was faint, barely distinguishable from cosmic background noise. But as it approached the solar system, it became clearer. Unlike the structured mathematical language of the Orion signal, this one was chaotic, emotional, aggressive, almost like distorted warfare chatter. Within hours, Earth detected multiple incoming signatures. Not one alien force, but several. The Serens were not alone. The first new fleet emerged near the Kuiper Belt boundary. Massive, angular ships covered in shifting crystalline structures appeared without warning. Their surfaces refracted light in unnatural ways, making them almost invisible until they moved. When they finally fully materialized on sensor grids, UEDI systems labeled them immediately. The Veil Syndicate. Unlike the Serens, the Veil did not hide their intentions. Their first action was immediate combat engagement. They targeted Seren formations with energy weapons that bent space into compressed shockwaves. Entire clusters of Seren units were obliterated within seconds. But what shocked Earth Command was not their strength. It was their hatred. This was not strategic elimination. It was war with emotion behind it. Then a third presence arrived. From a different vector entirely, Emerging from the shadowed region between Mars and Jupiter, another fleet appeared. These vessels were massive, organic-looking structures covered in layered biometal. They moved slowly, almost peacefully, but every Seren unit that approached them was instantly deactivated. They were not fighting. They were consuming control signals. UEDI systems identified them as the Kerith Collective. Unlike the Veil and Serens, the Kerith emitted no aggressive signals. Instead, they broadcasted a single repeating waveform across space that seemed to stabilize local gravitational fields. But their presence introduced something far more dangerous than war: balance. 3 alien civilizations. 3 different approaches to control of the same region of space. And Earth was now caught in the middle of their conflict. Inside UEDI command, panic escalated into existential fear. Analysts realized something horrifying. The Black Ark was not an invasion fleet. It was a neutral warship, possibly a catalyst or trigger that had awakened something much larger. And as the 3 factions clashed in deep space, Earth suddenly understood the truth behind the Omega symbol. This was not the end of humanity. It was the beginning of a galactic war that had already been going on long before Earth was ever noticed. Far in the distance, the Black Ark continued its silent approach, as if observing which side would survive long enough to matter. The moment the 3 alien factions fully engaged each other near the outer solar system, humanity realized something horrifyingly simple. Earth was no longer the target. It was the center. The war between the Serens, the Veil Syndicate, and the Kerith Collective had expanded into Earth's orbital space like a spreading storm. What began as distant fleet encounters beyond Neptune had now collapsed inward, compressing like a gravitational spiral that pulled every force toward the inner planets. And Earth was trapped at the core of it. The first direct impact came without warning. A fractured Seren formation, damaged by Veil attacks, drifted too close to Earth's magnetosphere. In response, Kerith vessels attempted to stabilize the region by emitting a massive wave of gravitational dampening energy. The result was catastrophic instability in low Earth orbit. Satellites that had survived the initial strike days earlier were torn from their trajectories. Entire communication grids collapsed again, but this time it wasn't a clean shutdown, it was structural failure. Space itself around Earth had become unpredictable. Cities across the planet saw strange phenomena in the sky. Auroras forming in impossible geometric shapes, lightning appearing in clear atmosphere, and stars seeming to shift positions for seconds at a time. UEDI command called it what it truly was: orbital collapse conditions. Then the Veil Syndicate made their move. Unlike the Serens, who analyzed, and the Kerith, who stabilized, the Veil attacked everything. Their ships entered Earth's near-orbit boundary for the first time, igniting localized space ruptures. These ruptures created temporary tears in the vacuum, releasing bursts of energy that vaporized anything nearby. One such rupture passed dangerously close to the Moon. A massive crater-like scar appeared on its surface within seconds, not from impact, but from energy shear. Earth saw it live. Panic reached global maximum. UEDI attempted full planetary defense activation, but the problem was no longer technology. It was scale. Human systems were designed for planetary defense, not multispecies interstellar warfare happening literally above their atmosphere. And then came the Kerith intervention. For reasons no one understood, Kerith vessels positioned themselves between Earth and the most aggressive Veil formations. Their biometal structures unfolded into massive lattice-like shields that absorbed incoming energy attacks. For the first time, Earth witnessed something unexpected: protection. But it was not mercy. It was control. Kerith signals began broadcasting toward Earth directly, not in language, but in neural frequency patterns that bypassed communication systems entirely. Millions of people reported the same experience: brief flashes of alien landscapes, vast oceans under red skies, and the sensation of being observed without judgment. UEDI scientists warned, this is cognitive intrusion. They are mapping human perception. Meanwhile, the Serens, who had initially initiated the invasion, re-entered the battlefield with renewed intensity. Their formation around Earth tightened, forming a complete orbital cage. And then, the worst realization arrived. The black arc was no longer approaching slowly. It had stopped just outside Mars' orbit. It was waiting, as if Earth was no longer a destination, but a stage. A controlled environment where three civilizations were now openly fighting over dominance, resources, or something far more unknown. Inside UEDI's deepest command bunker, the final assessment was delivered in silence. Earth is no longer a defended planet. It is a battlefield asset. And above them, the sky was no longer sky anymore. It was a war zone without borders. It happened without warning, and in a way no one had prepared for, not even the most advanced quantum prediction systems inside UEDI. After weeks of orbital chaos, something changed. The war above Earth suddenly paused. Not ended. Not resolved. Just suspended, like a breath held in the chest of the universe. The Serens stopped advancing. The Veil Syndicate ceased their aggressive ruptures. Even the Kerith Collective, who had been actively stabilizing space-time around Earth, froze their movements in synchronized stillness. For exactly 11 minutes, the entire region around Earth entered a state of unnatural silence. Then the sky opened. It wasn't an explosion or a tear in the traditional sense. Instead, space above the Pacific Ocean, visible even from daylight cities, began to distort like a surface being gently pressed from the other side. A vast circular structure formed in orbit, not built, but manifested, as if reality itself had decided to fold. From within this structure, a single transmission was broadcast globally. This time, it was not fragments, not symbols, not war imagery. It was a voice, but not auditory. It was a direct cognitive imprint. Every human mind on Earth received the same translated meaning simultaneously. You are not the cause of this war. The message paused, then continued. You are the reason it is being fought. Inside UEDI command, panic turned into confusion. Analysts tried to trace the origin of the transmission, but there was no signal source, no carrier wave, no detectable medium. It was as if the message had bypassed physics entirely. And then, the first entity arrived. A single Seren unit descended through the atmospheric barrier, not in a combat stance, but in complete stillness. It landed over the Atlantic Ocean without causing a single wave disturbance. The structure of its body shifted as it approached communication range, and for the first time, humans saw it clearly, not as a machine, but as something that had evolved beyond classification. A second presence followed. A Kerith envoy emerged near the same location, but did not land. Instead, it hovered above the ocean surface, its biometal form pulsing slowly like a living heart. And then, finally, the Veil representative appeared. Unlike the others, it arrived violently, cutting through space with a controlled rupture, but immediately halted aggression upon entry into Earth's atmosphere. 3 alien civilizations. 3 representatives. 1 planet. And humanity at the center. A global communication link was forcibly established. Every remaining operational screen, every emergency channel, every personal device became part of a single unified interface. The Serens spoke first. We are the executors. We maintain termination cycles. The Kerith followed. We are the stabilizers. We prevent collapse of converging systems. Then the Veil. We are the breakers. We eliminate corrupted cycles. Silence followed. Then Earth's command representatives, trembling, exhausted, unable to fully comprehend the scale of what they were hearing, asked the only question that mattered. Why is Earth involved? The answer came slowly, not from one faction, but from all 3, overlapping like conflicting truths. Because the signal originated here. Because the anomaly is anchored here. Because the next phase of the cycle begins here. At that moment, the Black Ark finally re-entered the conversation. It appeared above Mars again, closer than before, and emitted a single pulse that synchronized all 3 alien factions momentarily. And for the first time, Earth received a complete message, not fragmented, not symbolic, but direct. Earth is not a civilization. It is a containment node. And it is failing. The transmission ended. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Because humanity finally understood. The war was not over Earth. The war was about what Earth was holding back. And now, all three civilizations, and the Black Ark itself, were here to decide what happens when the containment finally breaks. After the first contact, Earth expected answers. Instead, it received fragments of something far more dangerous than silence. Truth that had been deliberately buried in layers of cosmic history. The Kerith Collective initiated what they called a memory projection protocol. Without warning, every major data network on Earth, along with the shared alien communication interface, was flooded with reconstructed visual sequences, not recordings, but reconstructed realities based on quantum residual imprinting. The sky above Earth dimmed as if the planet itself was being forced to watch its own forgotten past. What humanity saw first was not Earth. It was space, ancient, unstable, and violent. Stars were forming at unnatural speeds. Entire galaxies appeared to be growing like living organisms. And within this chaos, massive structures, far older than any known civilization, were constructing something around a young solar system. Then the image focused. A proto-Earth appeared. But it was not empty. Massive alien engineering fleets surrounded it, not building cities or extracting resources, but sealing it. Layer by layer, like a cosmic lock. UEDI scientists watched in disbelief as Kerith translation systems rendered the accompanying transmission. This planet was not formed naturally in its current state. It was modified. The Serans then added their fragment. It was designated as a containment node after the first collapse cycle. The veil, more aggressive in tone, completed the message. Something on this world cannot be allowed to propagate beyond its boundary. Inside Earth's command centers, panic was no longer emotional. It was intellectual collapse. Everything humanity believed about evolution, planetary formation, and even its own existence was being rewritten in real time. Then came the most critical revelation. The Black Ark reappeared in the transmission field, and for the first time, it did not behave like an observer. It corrected the narrative. A deep, layered signal resonated through every system. Earth is not the origin point of humanity. It is a recursive construct. A controlled repetition of an older civilization that once breached containment. At that moment, the projection shifted. Humanity saw it. Not myth. Not theory. A previous version of Earth. Civilizations rising far beyond current human technology. Interstellar travel. Energy manipulation at planetary scale. And finally, contact with something beyond the galaxy itself. Then, collapse. Not destruction from war. Not asteroid impact. But a system-wide erasure event. Entire civilizations were being deleted from reality, not physically but causally, history rewriting itself as if they never existed. The Kerith called it the stabilization protocol. The Serans called it the termination cycle. The Veil called it the correction event. And Earth finally understood the horror. This was not the first galactic war. It was the latest iteration of an ancient reset mechanism. And Earth was the most recent version of a failed experiment. But then something unexpected happened. A fragment of resistance appeared in the projection, an anomaly inside the ancient collapse timeline. A civilization that refused to be erased completely. Its final recorded transmission echoed across all systems. We survive in the cycle. We return through recursion. The containment will always fail. The projection ended abruptly. All alien factions went silent. Because they recognized the implication. If that ancient civilization still existed in any form, then it might already be inside the current cycle. And Earth might not just be a prison. It might be a door. Above Mars, the Black Ark activated its systems fully for the first time since arrival. And for the first time in the war, all three alien civilizations turned their attention not toward each other, but toward Earth itself. Because the next cycle was already beginning to move. For the first time since the Black Ark entered the solar system, there was no war in orbit. No Seran formations moving in perfect mathematical precision. No veil ruptures tearing space apart in anger. No Kerith stabilization fields bending gravity into silence. Everything had stopped. Not in peace. In fearful anticipation. Earth's surface was quiet too, but it was the kind of quiet that happens right before something irreversible. Inside UEDI's remaining command network, systems were barely functional. Half the planet's satellites were gone. Lunar communications were unstable. Even deep-sea relay stations were reporting abnormal energy fluctuations rising from beneath Earth's crust. And then the Black Ark did something it had never done before. It descended. Not into orbit. Not into near space. It entered the atmosphere. No explosion followed. No shockwave. Instead, the sky above Earth simply darkened, as if reality itself was being shaded over. The Ark moved slowly, deliberately, positioning itself above the Atlantic Ocean where the first contact had occurred. Every alien faction responded instantly. The Serens reactivated. The Veil reformed. The Kerith expanded their stabilizing lattice. But none of them attacked. Because they knew what was coming. The Ark opened. Not like a door, but like a memory being unsealed. A massive geometric fracture appeared along its surface, revealing something inside that defied all known understanding of matter. It was not machinery. It was not biological. It was something in between, something that existed as structured intent. And from it, the final transmission began. Every mind on Earth, every alien vessel, every system in the solar vicinity received it simultaneously. Cycle threshold reached. Containment integrity failed. Recursive civilization detected. Then the truth arrived, not as words, but as direct reality exposure. Humanity saw everything. Not just Earth's history, but the entire loop. Civilizations rising on Earth. Expanding beyond the solar system. Reaching into intergalactic space. And eventually triggering something deep in reality itself. A phenomenon known only as the first breach. Each time it happened, the same response followed. The Serens would execute termination. The Veil would eliminate corruption. The Kerith would stabilize reality. And the Black Ark would reset the structure. Not as enemies, but as functions of a system designed to prevent cosmic collapse. Earth was never special. It was repeatable. And every version of it eventually became dangerous enough to threaten the fabric of existence itself. But this time, something was different. Inside the projection, a deviation appeared. In this cycle, this version of Earth, humanity had developed something the previous ones had not. Awareness of the loop. And awareness was not part of the design. The Black Ark systems began to destabilize. For the first time, it was not executing a procedure. It was reacting. The Serens froze mid-formation. The Veil ships flickered as if losing dimensional stability. The Kerith stabilizers began overcorrecting, unable to predict new outcomes. Because the cycle was supposed to be automatic, predictable, infinite. But Earth, this time, had understood the structure of its own prison. And understanding was breaking the system. Inside the Ark, something ancient, older than the factions, older than Earth itself, began to awaken. A final message echoed across all consciousness. If the cycle is recognized, it cannot be fully reset. A choice must now be made. Silence swallowed the solar system. 3 alien civilizations waited. Humanity waited. Even the Black Ark waited. And for the first time in the history of all known cycles, the universe did not decide what would happen next. It waited for Earth to respond. The silence that followed the Ark's final message was unlike anything the universe had ever recorded. No movement in orbit. No faction response. No defensive coordination. Even the quantum noise of spacetime itself seemed to hold still, as if reality had paused to witness what a single civilization would choose when given knowledge of its own imprisonment. Inside Earth's remaining unified command network, UEDI leadership understood something critical. This was no longer a war decision. It was a definition of existence. The Black Ark's final directive still echoed across every system. A choice must now be made. And for the first time in recorded cycles, humanity was not being forced. It was being asked. 3 outcomes were presented, instinctively understood by all minds connected to the transmission. Reset the cycle. Everything would return to baseline. Earth would continue as it always had, unaware, safe, and contained, doomed to repeat the same path again. Submit to stabilization. Allow the Kerith, Serens, and Veil to permanently regulate Earth's evolution, preventing collapse but also preventing true freedom. Break the containment. Risk universal exposure. End the system entirely, even if it meant destabilizing the structures that held reality intact. Minutes passed. Then hours. Across the planet, humanity did something unprecedented in its entire history. It agreed. Not through governments. Not through power. But through a unified cognitive consensus formed by shared understanding of the truth. Earth had been reset before, countless times. And each time, the same outcome had followed. Endless cycles of rise, expansion, and erasure. This time, humanity chose differently. The signal was sent. Not as code. Not as technology. But as intent. We reject the cycle. The reaction was immediate. The Serens attempted to initiate containment protocols, but their systems failed mid-execution, as if the rules they followed no longer applied. The Veil prepared rupture cascades, but the energy collapsed before release, unable to anchor itself in a system that had lost authority. The Kerith tried to stabilize the structure, but stabilization requires a framework, and the framework itself was dissolving. And for the first time, the Black Ark did not enforce the cycle. It listened. A deep resonance spread through space, not as judgment, but as acknowledgement. Then came the final transmission. Cycle authority revoked. Containment structure dissolved. Recursive iteration terminated. The Ark began to disintegrate, not explosively, but gracefully, like a structure no longer needed. The Serens, Veil, and Kerith vessels followed, not destroyed, but released from function. Their purpose had ended. Above Earth, the sky slowly returned to normal. Stars stabilized. Orbital space reformed. The distortions in reality faded like scars healing over time. But something remained. A final fragment of the Ark's presence, suspended briefly in orbit, transmitted one last message directly into human consciousness. You were never meant to escape blindly. You were meant to understand before you left. Now you are no longer a cycle. You are a beginning. And then, silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of freedom. For the first time in an immeasurable span of cosmic time, Earth remained untouched by reset, untouched by correction, untouched by containment. Humanity looked up at the stars again. But this time, they were no longer asking if they were alone. They were asking what came next. And somewhere beyond the fading edge of the Black Ark's final trace, the universe did not restart. It expanded.